Oh wait, that's not what I wanted to do. Wrong button. Oh no, we're good. We're good now, but it was just like, oh man, I'm fucking up already. Oh, dude. Okay, so here we go. Getting ready to cover episodes 5 through 8 of The Staircase. I'm gonna set the timer. I'm actually gonna pad it a little bit and give us a little bit more than 45 minutes, but that way, not by too much though. Anyway, and I'll start it in 1, 2, 3, and I'll count us in, and we'll begin. And we're gonna go in 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're back with the next installment here from the second outing of the Hollow9ine Network's Behavioral Sciences unit. Still hanging out in Netflix town, but moving on down the line to the next major crime show that came along. Actually kind of resembles Mindhunter, so that's probably partially why it worked out so well to for us to cover next. But of course, it's called The Podcast Under the Stairs because we're covering The Staircase, and then further down the road and the chronology of Hollow9, we'll continue to cover crime shows like this that you keep in a file cabinet under your stairs, hence the podcast Under the Stairs.
That's right.
At least that's what I picture in my head. Dave the Klone here, continuing to direct things over here, both in the network and on the team. And joining me, author of the Dead series and voice of the big bad of Hollow9ine's Tangent City, Mr. T.W. Brown. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing well as can be expected. It's been a long, hot week, and it's finally starting to cool off a little bit where I'm at. Check your local weather, of course, for your own issues, but Oregonians don't do well when it's 95 to 100 degrees outside. That's not why we live in the Northwest.
For everyone listening in the future, we're talking about the August of 2018 weather here. So in case this is being studied in sort of like a history class or something, and they needed to verify what we're talking about, it was around this time in contemporary America that the weather started to just do whatever the fuck it wanted, regardless of what season it was.
Yeah. So other than that, yeah, I say pretty good. Looking forward to kind of breaking this down. This is the part of the Staircase run that is hard not for me to get like super outwardly emotional about, because I have some of my own issues with the way that the system operates to begin with, and this shows almost every flaw imaginable in the criminal justice system in one case.
Yeah, this is around this is the middle section of the show. This is episodes 5 through 8. And I think it's actually, when we were thinking about this show, talking about a bunch of episodes in one shot, because it's the trial. This is the meat of the trial, and it's where I feel like if you were talking about this to family and friends over dinner, this would be where you're like, oh, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. And you're actually talking about shit that happens like 2 episodes apart from each other, or you're talking about things that happen, way out of order. And it's easy for it all to blur together, because it was, I found myself actually thinking about a lot of like, what was my first courtroom drama or courtroom anything that I watched Hollywood movie wise. And as funny as this is going to sound, My Cousin Vinny is one of the first ones that come to mind. And I guess maybe the similarity in how it's like the deck was stacked against those guys from the beginning, and how it just was like, there's no way they're getting out of this. And meanwhile, here in this show, I think at times it looked that way, and at times it looked like he was going to get out of it. As I mentioned in the last episode, I Googled to find out, just because the tension was too much for me. I think because this is real, it was, I react to stuff like this. And I know you're kind of reacting to it from a much more closer to it perspective. And so as far as, I don't know what kind of disclaimer you want to put out about that, or reiterate any kind of explanation for that. And you go as far as you're comfortable going. And if there's anything that we said,
I've had my time with the criminal justice system. So you and I have talked about it, and in a couple of years, you and I are going to explore this on a much deeper level, probably doing our own thing, where I can sort of unburden some things that I'm still holding onto right now. But I just have to say that watching this, it shows so many things about the way a person's life can completely get sideswiped by people who are so set on getting their guilty verdicts that truth and facts no longer have to matter. They just have to get that guilty verdict to keep the record up, so that they can eventually move up the ladder in, things like district attorney and judge and things like that. Which, of course, the prosecutor for this, the district attorney that prosecutes this case, eventually does become a judge. So it's
Yeah, scary shit right there. I just felt like I think any rational thinking person watching this has to, at the very least, if they've never had anything that made them do this before, has to question some of the absurdity of the system. Even if you've never been in a courtroom and have never dealt with being on either side of a courtroom or a witness, and I've been a witness at a traffic thing once that really sucked. It was like just a pain in the nuts. But it just, it seems like something even like a little kid would look at and go, well, wait a minute, aren't people just making things up here? And how are things being so how are they so serious about something that they have no real proof for? And why does it seem like the people listening to the story in the jury box are like going along with it? It also, in my mind, I felt like it was an indictment of this idea of the jury of 12 peers. It's like, I don't know, man. If you pick like 12 dumb people and people whose IQ is far, how do I say this? They do not exceed. What's the opposite of exceed? Well, they just don't meet any kind of standard of critical thinking skills, and you can just feed them any kind of story. It's like, well, whoever is the better performer in court is the one that's going to win. And we're talking about things that affect people's lives, like could lead to death penalties and shit. It's crazy.
This case in particular, I mean, there are things, if I wanted to paint a bad picture of any person, I can find a singular moment in anybody's life. You can. It doesn't matter who that person is. And if you use that as the basis for how you let everybody know about this person, you're already tainting the pool, And that's the thing is this case, I mean, from the moment they start talking about, and we ended off with them bringing the body back of the lady that had died over in Germany. And for that to have actually been allowed to begin with was huge. I felt a huge mistake that was made by the judge when he granted that permission, and why the stuff couldn't have been done in Texas where she was exhumed versus taken up to North Carolina and given to this same woman who
do you want to jump right to Deborah Radish? Or
who had already shown that she was going to put on these autopsy reports whatever was going to help the prosecution. And at one point, the lady and her name escapes me for now, but the lady that is working with the prosecutor that just walks around like she's got a stick up her ass the whole time.
Black. I don't know what her first name is, but something Black. She's the one who really fixated on the anal sex detail.
And the fact that he was gay. And she's the one who sat there and said something to the effect of, these people work for us. She made that statement at one point.
In the courtroom?
Said, so how can you doubt what they're saying?
Well, I mean, a lot of that too, especially, so towards chapter 8 is the verdict. We should cover a lot of the irregularities and craziness. And it's cool. I mean, some of the chapter names in this area of the show are awesome. Chapter 5, A Weak Case, which is exactly what I feel like the documentary as a whole shows that that the prosecution had a very weak case. But then you get episode 6, The Prosecution's Revenge. And it's like, holy shit, you really start to see it's a game, and this is a game that really almost has nothing to do with the people that are the pieces in the game. And that has got to lead, and I guess I'm going to take a very conspiracy theorist slant on this section of the show. And then we got, after the episode, the prosecution's friends, we have the blowpoke returns, which this freaking blowpoke, and then the verdict in chapter 8. So that's like the where we are in the trial, the second half of the trial. And it's the fact that they point out, which to me, I mean, maybe it's obvious. The other thing, I guess I should say as a disclaimer, being somebody who works with video professionally, yes, you can make this series and design it to make us sympathetic to Michael Peterson. You can do that.
I mean, reality TV makes its lifeblood off of creating storylines and instituting drama where there maybe wasn't necessarily any to begin with, just because they take something out of context and then they blow it up and center an entire show around somebody's missing shoe. I mean, that's and this is in a sense, this is sort of courtroom reality TV is what we've got here. I mean, he brought these people over. I mean, Peterson brought these people in because he wanted this documented.
Yeah, I mean, I could see the value in it as a case study of the malfunctioning of the justice system. But there are still a lot of people I see on Facebook that say, how are any of you even considering the fact that he could be innocent? This guy's guilty as shit, and just like at times in these episodes when they're watching court TV, I sit there and go to myself, are you guys watching the same documentary as I am?
Yeah, the attorney says that at one point. He says, did they even see the same trial I was at today?
Yeah.
And then what we could do an entire 3-part series just on Deaver.
Yeah, I mean that too. The fact that there is, and I know that doesn't really 100% come out until episodes after these, but the fact that rewatching the episodes for this recording, his performance on the stand, everything about the way he and Deborah Radish conduct themselves in court was like as if they were sort of talking down to everybody, to the entire system. It felt remarkably like they're people who have a chip on their shoulder for some reason about maybe their profession not getting its just due respect wise from the rest of the law enforcement and justice community. I don't know. It definitely read to me, and especially too the detective Holland when he's on the witness stand and they're showing him the blowpokes. It's everything about it. It's as if they're like, why the hell do we have to go beyond just what we say? Why aren't you just listening to us? It eerily strikes me as ironic that this show has become popular or was released now because of the sort of time we're in country-wise, where it's almost like people are saying facts don't matter anymore. Like you could show me direct evidence and I'll say, I don't care. I believe this. You know what I mean? And and I feel like, and there's a lot of that going on in these episodes in particular with people who are very impactful on the outcome of the verdict of the case. But I have a shattered faith, I would say right now, in the concept of a jury. And I know I have a colleague at my day job who was recently on a jury for a murder trial, and they wound up sending the guy to jail and convicting the guy. And my colleague was really broken up about it. He was really felt conflicted about the fact that it's such a big, this is what this is. This guy's life is in prison now, like that we did that. Are we 100% sure? You know what I mean? And it's wild.
And I think that's the thing that has gone away from the justice system. We had this idea of you're guilty until proven innocent now, because you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. But here's the thing. The moment something comes out on anybody, it blows up all over the media and you no longer have a chance to be innocent. I wouldn't speak a moment of defense for somebody like a Harvey Weinstein, but he never had a chance the moment this stuff went public. He was done,
Right.
The Penn State coach, Bill Cosby. I mean, these are big names. Kevin Spacey, all this stuff. It's all public opinion. But then you get Chris Hardwick, okay? So then he gets a little mud kind of stirring around his pool, but then it dissipates and everything's fine,
Right.
And it's but that's still going to sit on his head for the rest of his life. And there's still going to be people that are going to look at him because they still only heard one thing. They only heard one aspect of it. And this is where things like social media and the internet have gone wrong. Where it was right was like when all that happened over in Egypt and they were exposing the corruption of the Egyptian, ruling power.
Yeah.
That was a good use of social media. But what it is now is it's a chance to just let people throw whatever crap they have out there. And you get somebody like a Dwayne Deaver who's supposed to be, quote, presented as an expert. And we find out later that he has zero expertise in this field. I could have gone up and done what he did. When they showed the video in episode 5 of them trying to recreate the blood spatter.
That whole, I guess we should go just in order of the episodes because there's absurdity after absurdity after absurdity in each one. And he's the first one. And it's just, again, for the way that he carried himself and the sort of condescension in his attitude. And I also felt uncomfortable. I get the idea that these people are instructed to do this, but when they give their answers, they give their answers to the jury as opposed to answering the lawyer who asked them the question. But I felt like even that at times from all of these people we're talking about, from Deaver, who is the blood expert for the prosecution, the state's blood expert, is it Rebecca Radish? Deborah Radish, who's the Deborah Radish, who is the medical examiner for the state, the prosecutor. And it just, I felt like after that kind of interaction with the jury, and even like when he's like, yes, I did that because you need to simulate an impact. And it was like, Jesus Christ, you're talking to them like they're children in school, but they seem to be going along with it. And it's almost like, are you using magic? Like, what the fuck is going on here? And this is where I've recently been on another kick of watching conspiracy theory videos. So maybe that is affecting my rewatch of this to prep for today's call.
That realm, and I'll stay in mine, and I think we'll keep a good balance.
It's definitely going to come up, man, and I think the reason I brought up my cousin Vinny is because I remember being a kid watching that in the theaters going, how is it that the prosecution has all these obvious tricks and how are they working? And I feel like that's what I felt the whole time watching this,
Yeah. And that's what a lot of this is again, what they're trying to do is present a case that can only show their side being 100% right. And they can leave nothing to chance because the theory is supposed to be once it's handed to the jury, they have to say that they are convinced beyond a reasonable doubt. So they can't show anything that might even remotely be erroneous. But when you see that crime scene, because they show it a number of times throughout this documentary, the first thing I noticed, and I want to repeat if I didn't make it very clear in our first episode, that when I sat down to watch this, Peterson was guilty as sin in my mind.
Yeah.
I was like, this guy he did it. And I want to see how they put him away. And I want to see how he tries to get out of it. And by the time we got to Deaver, I was already like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Because when you see the crime scene, if he beat her to death, there's nothing, that ceiling is so low that there would have been blood all over that ceiling.
As we call later cast off. We learned that from the blood experts as they're discussing this.
And one of Deaver's excuses was that, well, he could have been wiping it off between strikes.
I mean, like the fact that when he said that, people in the courtroom laughed, but the jury didn't. You know what I mean? And that's the problem. It's like, jury, are you actually idiots? Like that's, I'm having a lot of trouble with this. Like you're listening to someone say something that blatantly absurd, and you're like, well, yeah, that could be. You're like, what? That could be? You're in the middle of murdering somebody, and you're gonna hit them and then wipe it off so it doesn't splat. It's logistically, it's ridiculous.
Exactly.
And there were so many, even the first guy, the detective who was going through the photo evidence and everything that Rudolph would point out to, he's like, oh, that was a glitch. That was a glitch in the processing of the photo. And he's like, okay, well, how would you know that? You wouldn't. And you didn't note it anywhere? No. Like, right there, it's like, hey, jury, does that not sound weird to you that they wouldn't?
This is being presented as blood evidence, but now he's telling you it's a glitch.
Yeah.
Are you taking note of this? And that was, that was some of the other stuff, because like, and I know that I did go over this because right when you and I recorded episode 1, I'd had an injury to the finger. I'd had the finger laid open, and
Right.
I'm still finding blood in my house from walking through my house. I wasn't shaking my hand around or beating someone to death or grabbing anything or slinging my arm around. I walked through my house, and I'm finding blood stains in a part of the wall that I don't see how it could have gotten there, but magically it did. So this whole thing, to me, as soon as they saw the scene, they should have been, this is not, there's no murder here. There would have been blood. There would have been blood everywhere, and he would have had blood all over him,
and
not just his clothes, but him personally.
There was that. And what was the other thing that with that Deaver, when they said to him, like, hey, did you notice any blood spatter on his shirt? And he was like, no. And he goes, did you do any chemical testing or any like tests beyond a visual confirmation? And he was like, no. And
no, it
like
was a blue shirt, so it wouldn't have shown up. Yeah.
It was like, are you aware that you have other things at your disposal? And he says in court, no. And then Rudolph produces like their blood guy's report, I guess, and talks about all these different things. And then the guy says on the stand, oh yeah, you know what? When we did come back with it, someone did tell me this chick, this is her name, said, we could do this. So we actually did do more tests, and it didn't come to anything. And they're like, were you gonna tell us about that shit? Like, to me, like right there, episode 5, you should have been like, this is a mistrial, a full-on mistrial that this guy should probably be able to sue the police department over, because they are setting him up, man. Like, this is fucking nuts. Active participation in contaminating crime scenes. This is shit out of the movies. Like, are you kidding me?
And yet, the very next day, within hours of this going to television, it was completely being turned around. The whole Deaver testimony and the blood thing was being turned around. And this is back when we also had absolute, I mean, this is a woman that would have headed a witch trial if she'd have lived in Salem, and that's Nancy Grace. She would have been
God,
the prefect of Salem, and she would have been burning everybody that walked past her, because that woman had absolutely no sense, no common sense. She was completely incapable of impartiality. She made up her mind the moment somebody did something, and if it was a man versus woman court case, the man was already guilty anyway.
Yeah, so Nancy Grace is a monster.
Hated men as well, but I mean, this woman was a nut job, but all of the analysts in general, they would just throw things out and only discuss what was going to make the news palatable for people, and that was that Peterson was guilty, and how how this and this and this were lining up, and completely skipping over the inability of what I thought was the prosecution's job to prove anything had taken place.
Well, it's not even like it mattered. Like the people that there was the one that Rudolph got so pissed about, the correspondent who was like, I mean, who knows? Maybe he changed shirts. I don't know. Like they're just like, people would just make shit up and throw it out there, and suddenly people are like, yeah, that's what happened. And you're like, I swear to God, this sounds like medieval pitchforks and torches and shit. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, unbelievable. And all these same people, this is what pisses me off, because all these people are hypocrites. If any one of them were the ones on trial, they would be going, how could you believe that just because somebody said it? And meanwhile, they're the ones out there saying shit about someone else. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't know if it's because they want to be on this bandwagon. Like there's something about the mob mentality of like, we were all right, and so we all take a little piece of the satisfaction of this guy being found guilty and going to the chair. It's like we all get a little piece of, we did this, even if, I mean, it's like, and you don't care that there's questionability about it. And
Monty Python witch trial. It is. It's the Monty Python witch trial.
It's nuts.
It was John Cleese to take the stand and say he turned me into a newt. I mean, that's the only thing missing.
And you have things like it's almost as if you're in a Twilight Zone episode where if you use words that are too big, they just automatically ignore you because you have the one of the defense attorneys, Mr. Marr, or Mayor Mahar, whatever, however you say his name. I would say it Mar. I think they said Mahar in the show. Who is saying like, listen, as we move into episode 6, is that when they bring on the male escort and
Yes, I think so.
the crazy bitch who has flashbacks? I think that's episode 7 is the flashback chick, but
Yeah.
episode 6 is the male escort, and where it's like Mr. Mahar says, Your Honor, we are objecting to this being submitted as evidence or accepted as evidence or admitted as evidence because if even though they may not be centering their case around it, if even one juror hears, oh my God, he's gay, and that immediately makes him guilty no matter what, Mr. Peterson has been denied a fair trial. The Constitution says, it's like, it's funny how at times all of a sudden the Constitution doesn't matter to anybody else, but again, if it was them, they would for sure they'd be like, well, if the Constitution is being violated, like, come on, what the hell, man? This is my life. This is my life, but here they are going like gay sex. That's it. That equals guilty. And
well, especially in the Bible Belt of the South, which is where this trial is taking place.
Yeah, fuck Durham, man. Holy shit.
There is and again,
but it's everywhere. I mean, I feel like it's anywhere at this point.
Because I have friends from the South. I have friends from North and South Carolina, and that they don't share the backwoods beliefs of some of the yahoos and yokels that you run into, but. I mean, I live in the Pacific Northwest, and we're sort of on the outskirts. And I live in a town that's almost split in half. I mean, there's old Estacada and new Estacada, and it is a very different mindset in both sides. So
wow.
You find it everywhere. But I mean, there's still this when this trial took place. Think we're still a decade to decade and a half back from where we are now, and look how little that meter has moved towards acceptance in society now. So for this to be part of the trial when it has no bearing on murder at all was, I thought, probably the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen.
So much of what the prosecution gets away with in this documentary makes me feel like movies have given courtrooms too much credit. You know what I mean? Like that movies would actually concoct these elaborate speeches, and monologues that people give in the opening statements and the closing statements and then these aha moments. Whereas here, you got these yokels running around going, they're going to have anal sex. And you're just like, oh shit, they just won the case right there. You know what I mean? Like you can see it in the jury's face. They're like, anal sex. You know what I mean? Like, holy shit. And other things too. It's the fact that Mrs. Black or Miss Black from the prosecution could say things like, now, does that make sense to you? If they are in a loving marriage, why is he seeking sex outside the marriage? And I don't care what they say. Do you believe that a wife is going to know that her husband is bisexual and is going to be okay with him doing this? And meanwhile, the guy himself, the escort, is like saying, well, no, the majority of my clients are straight guys who are married, who just have tendencies or curiosities. And he goes, and a lot of them are very, in love with their wives. And a lot of them, their wives know about it. It's like you are making a judgment call from a personal standpoint about a lifestyle that is not your lifestyle, right? Like for her to be saying, do you honestly mean to tell me you believe that his wife would be okay with this? I'm like, okay, do you know any couples where it's a bisexual man married to a woman? Like, I've known all kinds of crazy different couples where rules are, that would just make you realize, like, holy shit, man, my life is very straightforward and boring. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm fine with it. I'm not looking for anything outside of that. But like, hey, if that's what straightforward and boring is to them, that's what you really, I think people need to fixate on, figure out a way to say, okay, whatever you do in your mind, that gets filed under straight and narrow and boring, normal, whatever, however you want to look at it, but put that label on it. For you, your day-to-day routine, that's what you consider normal. That's what you consider common. Someone else, whether they're bisexual, homosexual, that's their straight, normal, and narrow. That's their boring. That's their everyday. So if you can understand in those terms, where it's like, just because their life is different than yours doesn't mean that that's what their normal everyday is. You get what I'm saying? Does that make sense? I know it's probably not being articulated.
Absolutely. And while you were saying that, I was sort of building the next point, because you brought up the blow poke, and we talked about Deborah Radish and her testimony, and the fact that in her autopsy report that she wrote on the woman that had died 10 years prior, that of course her drawings did not match up at all to the actual injuries and everything else like that. In her report, she said that the injuries were consistent with a homicidal attack. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, she's up on the stand being, questioned and talking about how it's obvious this has happened and this and that and the other, and gets confronted with all those. Remember all the notebooks?
I was going to say, are you going to bring up the fact that goes, do you realize that between 1991
cases,
yeah,
257 cases where an item, hollow or not, wooden or metal, didn't matter, 257 cases from 1993, I believe he said,
through 2001.
And 257 cases, not one did not cause dramatic trauma on the brain, which
or
she
skull
did
fractures.
not have.
Right. Yeah. Like everyone that was a death ruled by blunt force trauma to the head.
Yes.
Did not have lacerations that did not also were not also accompanied by skull fracture, brain damage, or both. Yes. And it's funny because he brought that up. He's like, and this is in North Carolina. This is in your hood, yo. This is in your
7. And this was where, when you were talking about her expressions and hers and Deaver's and everything. And this is where she's rolling her eyes. And
right.
She's doing everything to just say, oh, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's fuck you. Hold on a second, Your Honor. Can I treat her like a hostile witness? Look at this. I mean, contempt of court, right? What the judge I eventually want to shit all over, but we'll get to him. He's the last one on the pile. Holy fuck, the judge. That's what made it feel like a movie, because every single time Rudolph would object to be overruled, and every time the prosecution would object to go sustained. And it's just God damn it, dude, they paid you. They fucking paid you, right? You're getting paid. That's the only way this makes sense. Truth obviously doesn't matter here. What the hell is going on? That's how I felt watching this. I can only imagine how you felt. You know what I mean? Well,
exactly. And this is the other thing that we see in this block, because remember when this whole thing started, the family was a cohesive unit, and by now this is where the family has fractured into two distinct camps. And the sisters of the deceased wife have taken up their position that obviously the husband killed their sister, and they pulled they pulled the daughter. And hold on a second, I have a squeaky
squeaky bird
in the mouth of a border collie. Let me remove.
Oh, I thought it was the bird.
No, the birds are upstairs. Okay, Tyrion, mine. Okay, all right, there we go. We've taken away his squeaky, so he's not happy about it, but he'll get over it. Go get your frisbee. That doesn't make noise.
Silent toy.
So yeah, it's just we see a family that gets split by this, and the sisters that stuck with their dad, who were actually not his children, one of them actually goes through home videos of the family to find out when the blowpoke came up missing.
Yeah. I love that.
They were very much in the mix of trying to prove that their dad was innocent.
Well, I mean, it's crazy. It's one of these things where, especially for some of the things that come up in this trial, it makes you start to really realize the memento dilemma, right? Where memory is malleable and can be influenced. I mean, think about this concept where your adoptive mother has died tragically.
Yeah.
Your adopted father is being suspected, the main suspect, the only suspect. It's as if they didn't even try to think about or look for any other possibilities on this. And you know for a fact he didn't do it. And there's nothing that they could say to you to convince him to do it because you know the guy and you know their relationship. And then you have someone like the district attorney go, we think it was something like this, which the sister of the deceased has in her house and claims to have given to every sibling she has.
And it's come up missing.
But we know was in this house at some point, and that's what we think it went missing. And like you're sitting there going, you're trying to tell me there was something in the house that I have lived in for decades that I know wasn't there and that he knows wasn't there. Everybody in here knows wasn't there. You just had no other weapon to blame this on. But because you think this is what it is and the way you presented it, you know, you've told this jury that pissed me off too. Miss Black says that shit a lot. You just told this jury that. Are you sure? You know, and it's just like, yeah, that's why I said it. You know what I mean? Like when she questions the computer recreation guy, the biomechanics guy. Oh my God, that infuriated me. Because she's like, wouldn't you agree that someone who's there, right there, looking at the body, touching the body, feeling the organs, that they would be at a better vantage point to say what happened to those lacerations? And he's like, not to say what caused them. No, you know, they're there to look at them and measure them, sure, but they're not in any better position to say what caused that than I am, but I'm at least coming at it from a scientific point of view. We have biomechanics. We understand how physics works. We can, by using the scene and the evidence present, recreate it to this level, you know, and that's a world of difference than saying we think it was this, even though we haven't found one in the house. You know what I mean? Like, and that right there, that's like episode 1 or episode 2.
Well, you know, and another thing that when all of this stuff started kind of being thrown together, the one thing that and you noted this last episode was maybe they just decided not to make part of it in the documentary, as far as maybe it just wasn't a compelling testimony or whatever, but the sound recording thing that they did.
It pisses me off that never came up in the courtroom.
We never see that played out in court. Now, whether it did or not, I don't know, if it just didn't make the cut. But we saw that in the pre-show, so you would think that maybe they could at least follow through with enough of it to let us know what happened, because they sure made a big spectacle out of doing it and using it as part of their proof, and then it just kind of seemed to vanish.
Well, and so, you know, that would go to, if we're trying to be fair and balanced, which I don't even want to use because wasn't that Fox's fucking fucking dick bags?
You used a Fox line.
Jesus Christ. But, you know, if we're trying to be objective, how about that one? We'll use a bigger word than they know how to use. Yeah. If we want to be objective, then you would have to say that lends credence to anybody who wants to say that this documentary was clearly designed and slanted to make us be sympathetic to Michael Peterson, because if that wasn't something that was eventually, I mean, now the thing is, though, we see it's 11 episodes of documentary. This trial is episodes, I think, 2 through 8, and then there's more to come later. But shit, we only see certain days. Like there are times where it's like, okay, day 22 of the trial, day 34. Maybe somewhere between day 22 and day 34, the tape was played, and maybe
like 22 through 30, and we get a 5-minute snippet. So obviously, a lot more happened between days 22 through 30 than 5 minutes of testimony.
And maybe playing that tape in court didn't go over as well visibly as they thought it would. Maybe they were able to tap dance around it too much. And again, you know, if I'm going to come at this from a filmmaking perspective, especially if as a filmmaker and as a storyteller, I believe that the guy is innocent. Yes, you can put this together in a way that manipulates the audience to a degree, at least emotionally attempts to lead them down that path.
But if you're going to do that and really blatantly do that, then I think they would have downplayed the whole gay aspect.
Right. Well, no, I think they
on a wider spectrum, more people are going to look at that and immediately be negative towards Peterson just because of that aspect of his life.
I don't know. I think especially at the time that this is hitting Netflix, it's enough of a hot topic issue in the world, I think, for people to be able to say, which I think is why they left it in, is to show that you're in the land where science doesn't matter. You're in the land of mythical make-believe shit. And so when you can latch onto an issue that to them they find repulsive and will set off that circuitry, that pre-programmed circuitry of like, okay, automatically, no matter what you say, you're of the devil and you are not to be trusted. Homosexuality still is that for certain areas of the country. So I think for them to leave it in, it's a good indictment of how it taints not only the attitudes of the people, but the meeting out of justice. Oh God, I'm watching the scene where they're giving the verdict and all the daughters are starting to cry. One of the things I felt annoyed by is how clear it is that this system of justice is different to everybody. And to people who haven't ever dealt with it before, you could see the kids representing this sort of stuck in the idealized world. They automatically assume they're just like, well, he's not going to get, he's going to be acquitted. Like there was, I think, a point where they're shown at dinner and the one girl goes, Dad, when you're acquitted, are you going to come visit me in college? It's like, it actually,
go to France with him. Yeah.
It actually annoyed me how naive they were, I guess. You know what I mean? And I guess, that's part of the humanity of the story here, because, you see them destroyed right now. And this fucking bitch, Miss Black on the goddamn prosecution. And what is the prosecutor's fucking name again? I hate this fucking guy. And, like, I see his face and I'm just like, God, and he's a judge. Like this, for me, one of the biggest feelings I was left after watching this batch of episodes again is, you know what? As soon as I have the money to do it, fuck all y'all. I'm going to live out in the goddamn woods. It's the only way, and they're trying to make that impossible and illegal. They're trying to make people going off the grid. Conspiracy theory Dave is saying at some point going off the grid is going to be resulting in you getting hunted down, but I don't give a shit. What this case shows is that unless you have got a live feed of a camera on you 24/7, some piece of shit politically motivated prosecutor can make some shit up, fill a jury box full of 12 idiots. I'm sorry, I see these people as fucking stupid if they were able to be swayed by this and not see the obviousness of the bullshit tactics of the prosecution. It just, to me, it's horrifying, that implication that unless you can verify every minute of your day with proof beyond proof, and even with proof, it seems like it won't fucking matter. When the system decides, hey, we're fucking with you now, and there's pretty much nothing you can do about it, that's a horrifying thought. And I feel like I just want to get the hell away from it then. Fuck you. If this is what the system is, if this is what society is, and this has to be a part of it, I'm not saying this is even anybody who's doing anything wrong. You automatically are found, thought to be guilty or something when you start talking like this, but like, this is horrifying. This is horrifying.
Yeah,
this is hard to watch.
When we watch the trial as it unfolds, that there were actually times that I felt that in the keeping things, trying to show both sides of it.
Objective, yeah, we're good.
Objective, and trying to do the objective thing. There were times where I felt that the defense dropped the ball by not making objections. With the 911 operator, there was one moment with the 911 operator where prosecution had objected to something that was asked and they got overruled, but then they come back as a cross-examine after she'd been questioned by the defense, and they say, is it in your opinion that he could have, that it's possible that he could have been faking the emotions?
Oh my God, yes. Thank God you brought that up. I forgot.
And I'm like, where's the objection? Because that is objection speculation.
Yeah, speculative, and that's what all of this shit was. There were so many things that they said that I felt like, you're fucking not allowed to say that. Like, that's
why did the defense not object? That was one of those times where I thought the defense dropped the ball, and it's like, why are you not just stopping that line before it even gets out of her mouth? Because she had to sit there and fumble for a minute.
Well, because it's like the equivalent, they kind of almost asked I felt like they were asking everybody, like, so do you think this was an attack? It's like, you might as well ask the fucking mailman. You're asking people who aren't experts in that. You know, the medical examiner is never the person who says, I determined that this person died of somebody stabbing them. You know what I mean? Like they could say the body, the person died from blood loss resulting from multiple stab wounds, but you can't say like this guy stabbed them right-handed. You know, well, I guess maybe you can from a. I can't find a good example with the medical examiner other than saying, looking at an autopsy report of a body that's been dead for 20 years and then saying this is the result of homicidal intent. You know, it's like, oh, fuck you. You know what I mean? Like that's great. Now, it's amazing that the same prosecution is fine with that, but then would sit there and say to the guy with the computer animation, don't you think somebody who was there with their hands on the body? I'm like, this chick wasn't there for 20 years. This body went in the ground for 20 years. And now you're trying to like make it fit a narrative that's happening today. Like it's nuts. It's nuts. All of this on its surface is crazy. I'm sure if they dug a little bit, you could find, and I think we did allude to it in the last one, that he was very critical of the local government and critical of the way that the economy.
Yes, the police department. He'd written articles about the police department's ineptness at doing their job. And then, of course, they show up at the scene and right away turn it into a crime scene. You know?
In terms of crime scene, and clearly with, you know, there's evidence to show that they tampered with it. You know what I mean? That it was contaminated from the night of the murder. You know what I mean? And it's I feel like I'm surprised we haven't seen a follow-up story to this documentary without going too far into what comes out in the following the last batch of episodes.
Well, and I think, yeah, and when we get to that, I have some thoughts on why we probably don't/won't see a follow-up to this particular story. Just because of how the last couple of episodes played out. And here's where I can speak from experience. You reach a point of fatigue, and you also reach a point of lack of faith in the system's not here to protect me.
Yeah. Well, that's not, I mean, I didn't mean follow up from their side.
The system is here to do what it wants, and that is keep the prison industry alive. You know,
I was thinking more like sort of, I guess, along those lines, but follow up that like some federal level DA has seen this and has been like, are you fucking kidding me, Durham? You know what I mean? And just like shown up and been like, top to bottom, every motherfucking one of you in here for review right now. And just been like, we are firing half of you. I don't even give a shit. Half are going.
Some of them are no longer in their jobs that they were in before. Deaver certainly is not, and we'll get to that again later. But yeah, and you've got to also understand, speaking from the other side, for the prosecutor, he was doing his job. His job was to extract a verdict of guilty. That, you know, that it's like a football game.
Right.
His touchdown is the guilty verdict. So that was his job, just like the defense's job is to prove that he didn't do it. And so from where he's sitting, he cannot, whether he inwardly feels it, he cannot for a moment let up and show weakness, because then he loses his case, and then that's a statistic. That's a loss record. You're hanging a big L on, you know, Tom Brady. Then if you're going to do that, that L doesn't ever go away. You know,
so that's the whole thing. This system is, you know, always presented, I guess, when we're taught about it or when we first learn about what it is, that it's supposed to be above shit like that. You know, like there's supposed to be a higher
win-loss system. It is a win-loss system, especially if you're trying to climb a political or a partnership ladder. If you're trying to make partner, you've got to rack up the wins. We see it in movies all the time. That's the Hollywood version. You know, you're about ready to make corporate partner there, Dave. One more victory for you in the courtroom, and we're all, you know, a corner office for you in Manhattan. Okay. And it doesn't matter that you've got to bury somebody that didn't do it. You just have to get that win. You know, yeah. I mean, that's your job. Your job is
that is such an obvious truth after this, though. Like, again, the follow-up in my mind is, why isn't there some kind of just reaction in general? Like, why isn't there rioting in the streets? Why isn't there like some kind of just rising up of like, everything's bullshit? Like all these conspiracy theory videos talking about how we're in like this controlled system, like a shared fucking matrix simulation. Like it's becoming too obvious, guys. Like, I don't know if the internet, maybe you should have never let the internet be discovered, because that's what's letting us figure it out. But for fuck's sake, you watch this and if you don't at least doubt the validity of maybe, I don't know, at least half of all the court cases that have ever been tried in the country, in the world, in history. I mean, how many innocent people went to jail? You know what I mean? How many? So fucking many. So many more than you could even imagine.
And, you know, from somebody who's been inside, I mean, I've sat down with guys who will come right out and tell you, yep, did it, you know, but you'll sit with other guys and be like, you know, they're lost, they're confused because they're like, I shouldn't be here, man, you know, and maybe they didn't handle it well, you know, and you know, they hang up, you know, I mean, that happens inside quite a bit, you know, you get guys that their life's over now and they hang up, you know, I mean,
yeah, it's like, well, I mean, from the outside,
suicide inside is a huge issue that doesn't get talked about socially, but it is a very big problem.
I mean, to me, from the outside, it seems like it's hell on earth, you know, like, so I could totally, for someone who didn't actually do what they're convicted of, beyond the just physical hardship of that existence, the psychological mind fuck of it is, it's hard to even imagine as someone who's never been in that position, you know, so,
I tell people now that I would trade my worst day out here for my best day in there easily. There's no comparison. I mean, the best day in there is still nowhere close to as good as my worst day out here. Now, stack all that up. I got a type 2 diabetic notice. I had kidney stones. You know, I mean, I had a pretty crappy week a couple weeks ago. That week is nirvana. That week is heaven compared to a week on the inside. You know,
yeah.
I mean, just this last Friday, I mean, I went in and spoke to guys. I do a lot of outreach stuff and go inside facilities and talk to guys still about getting, you know, themselves set up for success for when they leave and everything. And you remember as soon as you walk through those gates and, you know, the smells and the sounds and everything else comes back to you. And then you sit in a room with these guys and you look at the faces and you can see that weary sort of fatigue that is a constant about doing time. And so, yeah, it's when you put people in there, so if you're listening to this or watching this or whatever, and if you ever end up on a jury, be the 12th angry man, you know, be the guy that says we're supposed to be beyond a reasonable doubt. That means if you have any doubt at all, if there's a flash in your mind that says, well, maybe, then it's not guilty, period.
And in my mind, how hard is it to be that 12th man where you just simply put it to them, to all the people who are so quick to say that it's easy for them to say guilty? All right, if it was you there and you didn't do it, you know what I mean? You're in this room now. You see how this works. If that was you out there waiting for 12 strangers that they call your peers to figure this out, would you want them to just go based the way we're going? Would you want this to be the conversation they're having about you? You know, like, and that's what, like, it pisses me off that in 2018, I mean, this was obviously 1991, and then again, there's parts of it that come up in the 2000s. But I mean, just in general, that it's so hard for people to have empathy in that way. To, you know, I mean, and of course, you know, you're saying, like, obviously, if it's an obvious case, there's video. The fucker guy is like saying, celebrating with the dead body in his hand.
Briefly touch that moment because, okay, like remember that in Arizona when that guy shot the astronaut's wife, the woman that was the senator, and it's all on video, and then he ends up in court 8 days later and enters a plea of not guilty. It shouldn't even be allowed.
Right.
Are you on film? There's no trial. You're guilty. Goodbye.
Yeah.
End of story. That's it. Done. Set. Match. You know, so there's more sides. I mean, we chew up so much time with that crap too. You
Yeah.
know, the guy that walked into the theater in Denver, Colorado on the night of the Dark Knight and shoots a bunch of people up. I'm sorry, you don't get to plead not guilty.
Right. I mean, now I
So
guess
the system's broke both ways. The
Because I
system is
say the hardship is, what if there is that person who actually is hearing the voices, has snapped, has lost their reality button, and then they come to again? You know what I mean? Like, this is. I guess maybe is it just supposed to be that reality is just not fair. There is no really.
well, yeah, certainly. I mean, there is no fairness. But you know, when I watched this, the things that stuck out to me were the fact that the prosecution was allowed to make the fact that he had had a outside the marriage homosexual relationship part of a case. Wasn't part of the case. They were allowed to take something from 10 years prior where
20,
there was no case,
18
no
years.
accusation. He was never suspected or considered the murderer, and they were able to all of a sudden turn that into a quote second murder, and they refer to it as a murder throughout the rest of this show.
Yeah.
And that, to me, those are all some of the problems with the system.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that it's like that, one, they did some very absurd things and said some very absurd things, and two, they did it with such confidence and bravado that it was as if it was gaslighting. You know what I mean? It was as if you think this is bizarre, there's something wrong with you. It's like, no, fucker. We got someone on the stand talking about flashbacks, trying to act like this has been fucking killing her to have in her mind for 18 years. Oh, but she didn't remember the shit until she showed up last week. You know what I mean? Like, this is a fucking crisis actor we have on the goddamn stand here. You know what I mean? Like, what are we doing?
These are all the women that come out after the first person comes out to make an accusation against the celebrity. Right. These are women 6, 7, 8, and 9 that says, yeah, in 1983 he touched my butt. You know, I mean, I'm sorry, get out. That's what I would tell them. You don't get to come to this party. Get out. You know, and maybe that's insensitive, and maybe there's people right now that are just uproared that I would say such a thing. But I'm sorry, you take all the credibility away from woman 1 when you come in as woman 7, 8, and 9 to say, yeah, me too, from 40 years ago.
Or you know, if you're doing that and then you're found out a week later that you were texting your friend saying, hey, I'm going to do this because I used to go out with that guy and I would have a plausible chance of being believed. You know what I mean? Like that's the whole thing too. It's like you could have 1 through 6 and 8 and 9 actually all really legitimately have their stories to tell and their truths. And, you know, and maybe one of them did wait 30 years because there are like certain elements of times being different. You know, that's a big factor in this the fact that we're watching this case with 2018 eyes, knowing that it took place in 2001. But that one person, that one opportunistic piece of shit, and that's the thing, you can never. It's like you can never tell until it's too late. That's there's so much about this where maybe we're supposed to be questioning sort of how we value judge all of this as a society. You know, the idea that, I mean, I think even from a little kid, I always thought it was completely absurd that 12 people who you don't know are tasked with deciding who they believe. And there are 2 groups trying to convince them of their side of a story about something that none of them were present for, except for the one person. And just because of the fact that they were present there, their credibility is shot with half of the room. You know what I mean? Like just think about when you line it up like that, when you start lining these details up and you go, and this is what we've been doing for how long? This is how we've been deciding things. Like, are you out of your fucking minds? All of this is left up to like the mercy of mental illness on all sides. You know what I mean? Like, holy shit.
I always laugh because just not more than, I would say, 6, 7 weeks ago, you know, I got a postcard in the mail. You've been selected for jury duty.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus, man. Wow.
And I was like, really?
No, so like, wow, the mind fuckery going on right there is so.
And now get this. This is proof of how the hell they could hope to have an impartial system, because I've already said I've been inside, I've done time. And if I'm going to sit on a jury, then you darn sure better believe that unless I know for sure, which means I'd have to have seen it happen, I'm not throwing a guilty verdict on somebody. It's just not going to happen. I
Yeah.
mean, I have to know, there has to be a photograph of the guy in the act, and not just one, but several frame by frame shots. And I called and said, yeah, I don't think I'm a candidate. And they went, oh, yes, you are.
Meanwhile, I became immediately ineligible when I got a notice that was still addressed to my old address when I had moved, and I called the number, or I went online. There were a couple options: you could call or you go online. I go online to check in to find out what time I'm supposed to go, and it says, "Has any of the below information changed since the time that you received your thing?" And I was like, "Yes," and I put in the address, and they're like, "You are no longer eligible. You'll receive something else in the mail sometime soon." And I haven't received anything yet, so now I'm sure that we're saying it. The algorithms of social media were probably sending texts and tweets to all the right people.
Well, I didn't get selected either. So
Lucky you. I actually almost got. Yeah, lucky them. I remember I went to jury duty and I almost got selected to be on a murder trial. And the craziest part of what I thought the procedure that was going on was they were calling people up, like we were all sitting in what I guess would be the audience, the spectator box of the courtroom, and they would call us each up by our number, and it was sort of like you were standing here, and like the judge was here, the prosecutor was here, the defendant was like standing like shoulder to shoulder with me. I was standing right next to a fucking murder suspect and the defense attorney, and we're all standing in a little circle. And they're like, "So, are there any reasons you wouldn't be able to be a juror for this trial?" And I was like, "If it's starting this week, I'm leaving for Vegas on Tuesday." And I took out of my backpack. I'm like, "Here's my entire itinerary for this business trip, and most of it's already been purchased in this sort of non-refundable way." So, and they're like, "Is there anybody else that could go for you?" I'm like, "Well, our department already lost one person this month, so we're kind of already operating understaffed, and I should be going with somebody else, but they already said I have to go by myself. So I don't think somebody else could go for me." And so that was how I got out of having to be on the jury. But I just thought that right there, the fact that I'm like, why am I standing next to the guy that might be a murderer? And you're asking me if you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like this is too close. Like, I feel like this is not what I've never seen this on TV. I'm not cool with this. I don't know what's going on here. And then later I went to the restroom after they had let a bunch of us go, all the people that they had already excused, we could go back to the holding area. And I went to the restroom, and the murder suspect walks into the bathroom, and I'm like, "Yo, this is weird." He's like, "So, you think you're gonna be on that jury?" And I'm like, no, I actually I'm traveling for work, so I'm not gonna be around." And it's like, "Oh yeah, that's right. All right, well, have a nice day, man." And I'm just like, how in the fuck is a murder suspect just walking around unsupervised,
he's
able?
out on bail. Hey, if he's out on bail, he's part of the society until he's convicted, and that is guilty until proven innocent. You're demonstrating there, my friend.
Well,
He's
I'm
innocent
just,
until proven guilty.
I
He
guess
might be a murder suspect, but he's only a suspect.
I just didn't think that was appropriate, that he could be talking to people who would be on the jury
Oh
before.
no, no, they're not supposed to talk to jury members. Trust me. If you'd have been on the jury, it would have been mistried right then.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you have contact with jury, that's a big no on the list.
Yeah.
You're not, as a defendant, allowed to have contact with any member of the jury. Period.
Well, that's what I mean. The standing next to him thing in the courtroom was weird, but I'm like, well, I'm in the fucking room. You know what I mean? There's people around. I'm not worried in that regard. But then when he was like, "So, you think you're gonna be on that jury?" I'm like, what the fuck is this? You know, like, are you about to like give me your side of the story before we go to trial, just so that I have the inside scoop? You know what I mean? Like right there, I felt like, how is this allowed to happen? What the fuck is going on here? Are there cameras? Like, what is this shit? And then I just went back to the holding area and finished reading my book. But yeah, man.
You know, I mean, so watching this, and I think what we take away from this block leading up to the verdict is that every misstep, I think, that could be possibly thrown at a trial took place in this one. I mean, we had things that had nothing to do with reality. And you have a woman talking about a case that's 10 years prior. You know, you talk about Flashback Woman. You've got her. You've got the sisters. And then you've got me outside. You know, you've got the Nancy Grace thing and CNN and Court TV and all these things that we're, you know, plugged into now. And it's just, I think what this really shows is that there's no way that a fair trial can really happen anymore.
Ever.
And he made a statement earlier that, you know, thank God I have the money to be able to do this, because what about all these people who don't, you know? And that was one of the things that he sort of lamented on early on. So he uses up everything he has to try and, you know, fight this case.
I think this is why I say I just want to move into a cabin in the woods. I'm just like, fuck this, man. You know what I mean? Like,
so we get to verdict day, and you've got him as well as the attorney, the daughters, the sons. There was actually quite a bit of optimism going into that verdict day. There was, and they also say that the longer the jury deliberates, the better it is for the defense.
Usually, yeah.
Usually. And so this is one of those times where, you know, as the days ticked by, you thought, okay, good. If you didn't know the outcome, and if you don't know the outcome because you haven't watched it, you might want to put stop right now, because you know, you've already probably gotten the gist.
I'm sure you probably figured it out, yeah. And we did a lot of spoiler warning in the last episode, but
yeah, they come back in, and it's just you watched, because you just rewatched it. You know, you see his daughters behind him just get shattered.
Yeah, well, they're smiling at first, even like when they finally came, they were all like, "Yeah, finally they're back." You know, like they were ready for that. Yeah. Well,
Dad's coming home.
And they also, I guess, had that meeting where the one guy on their team, the guy with the mustache and the white hair, who was sort of a private investigator, I forget what his name is. He was like, "I just don't see a conviction." He goes, "But I also don't see an acquittal." Like, he was trying to give what he thought he was reading, watching the jury each day during the course of the trial. He was on the defense team, right? And he's like, "But I do see maybe a hung jury," which I guess is when you have that, even if that 12th angry man isn't able to convince anybody else, it still has to be a unanimous decision of either innocent or guilty, right? So if you have that one person who's like, fuck all the rest of you, I swear to God, I am not budging. There's nothing you can fucking say to tell me that you have beyond a reasonable doubt when I'm sitting here telling you what all the reasonable doubts are. I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to change my goddamn mind. We're fucked. Sorry. That's hung jury. So, and I guess they joked like, hey man, you know, if there's a hung jury, then you got a hung lawyer too, because I'm not going through this again. I think the things that stand out to me are that what we would assume, because of how obvious they are to be absurd, what we would assume would universally be taken as absurd will not be. And that there are places, probably every place when you think about it, where people can literally just make up what they think might be the truth. And if they say it enough times and in a convincing enough way, the right people are going to start going along with it, and at that point the train is out of the station and off the rails, and there's probably
got their pitchforks and their torches, and Frankenstein's monster has been sighted.
Yeah, so unless you can get your Avengers to assemble and you guys have some Infinity Stones to fight back with, you're kind of fine. I mean, I think it was in the first block where he's like, how do people do this? It makes me feel like it's Russian roulette walking around not having just a spare $1 million around in case you ever get wrongfully accused of something. You know what I mean? And that's where I'm just like, shit, man, I really hope Hollow9ine takes off because I want to be able to protect me and my friends in case we're randomly accused of some shit we didn't do, but we can't prove it because like jackasses were allowed to contaminate the crime scene, and they peopled the jury box with stooges And yeah, so I'm fucked.
And
Sorry.
brought in people with flashbacks that remembered that you had a gun in your hand 6 months ago.
Yeah, what the fuck? I mean, like, oh yeah, Flash. Like it just like it sounded like an idiot. You know what I mean? And I think that was the thing. Like the lawyer questioning her is just so like almost like aghast that she's answering the way she is, and he keeps trying to ask it in a more obvious way. He's like, so these they've got phones in Germany, right? I mean, you could have called somebody. You didn't have to sit there and live with this torture for 18 years, did you? You know what I mean? And she's like, well, yeah, I've lived with it all that time. It's like, you didn't really answer the question there. Like, why didn't you fucking call somebody if it was really weighing on you? How much is the prosecution paying you to have these flashbacks? Would have been, my question that would have been objected to. But still, I can't believe it. The other thing, if before I see that you got something to say, I'm sorry, I'm hogging.
That's okay. That's all right. That's all right.
One of the things I've always found ridiculous about the entire process too is the idea that they can say like objection, and then the judge will say sustained. Jury, you disregard that last answer. Shitbag. My memory doesn't work that way. It doesn't have an Apple delete key. I'm not just gonna suddenly forget this fucker said this. So if you really mean to tell me any of us out there believe that in deliberation they're not talking about shit that was objected to, that the judge said that they're supposed to disregard, like, come the fuck on. It's the counting room in Vegas. No one else is allowed in there. How do we know that that's not happening? You know what I mean? So to me, as soon as it's said, you've contaminated the jury, no matter what it is, whether it's objected to later, unless there's a lawyer on the jury who's going, hey, well, listen, no, that guy wasn't really allowed to say that. And it's like, all right, so what? He wasn't allowed to say it. That doesn't make it untrue. And if he said something that's true, there's like so many things about the system that are just on their face fucking stupid. Stupid. And we've been just like going along. I mean, it feels weird to be questioning it, to be honest. Like I remember being a little kid going like, well, this doesn't make sense, but this is what all the grown-ups say, so I guess this is what we do, and maybe one day it'll make sense. But like as the older I get, I'm going, this is just one of the many things that are so odd that we all just automatically conform to, that I get why there are all these conspiracy theories about what is our reality, because this is just stupidity now. Like there's too much sheepleness about us that too easily takes over. You know what I mean? It's just sort of, it's weird. Anyway, yeah, we have a few minutes.
We're certainly not, I mean, we're
not an anarchist. I'm not saying I'm suggesting anarchy or anything,
But we can't change it today. But it's a matter of, can you be the person to start affecting that change? I mean, we do talk a lot about this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem. So how do we fix it? We have to start affecting a change. I mean, and I think that is sort of where this comes into play, and where it falls historically is we're in a position right now where change can be made if we come together and do it, you know? But one person has to start it, and a lot of people have to step up and support that one person, and it has to snowball. A lot of really good ideas die on the launch pad because nobody gets behind it. If you wouldn't have had anybody step up and say, yeah, Dave, this is a great idea. Let me help do this show. Let me help produce this. Let me be a voice for you there. Hollow9 doesn't move. It dies as your dream, but you found the upswell of people to step up and say, yep, that's a torch I can carry. If we're going to make changes, this is one of those things where people look at it and go, well, this is just too big for me to touch.
Right. I was going to say, it's one of those things that it's like even suggesting changing it is scary to people, like that concept. So, and especially now when we're in an age where people are sort of shameless about not giving a shit whether what they believe or not can be proved to be true. If they like it, they're just going to believe it. So, it's an uphill battle. It definitely feels like an uphill battle, but we should go down swinging. You know what I mean? Like in my mind, if this is the end of days, if we're at the time where everything's about to just change for the even worse than it's ever been, there's no reason to not at least give everything a dying chance, like go down swinging, fight for it. And I feel like maybe that's another reason why a show like this is important, a show like The Staircase, to really give people an inside look at what it's like, and leave a little bit of it up to them. But, give a voice to this. I feel like for the people that are afraid to challenge things that may or may not be true, things like, oh, if it comes from the police, it's automatically okay. Well, no, look at what happens when you're on the other side of that. You know what I mean? And I wonder if people are taking it from that perspective. I know that every debate I've seen on Facebook has been pretty 50-50 of people believing he's innocent versus him being guilty.
Yeah.
So, we're here just kind of continuing the debate and trying to bring up points that we, react to. And I feel
real world points that you can take away from this and say, you know what, if I watched this and if that was me in Peterson's shoes, how would, and that's the thing, put yourself in Peterson's shoes right now. Whether you think he's guilty or innocent doesn't take that out of the equation. Put yourself in his shoes. Was his sexuality allowed to be part of making him out to be a bad guy? Yes, it was. Was a case that had no bearing at all on him, that had happened several years earlier, and just because he happened to be in the vicinity of it and knew the person and responded to the call when help was asked for, and that was allowed to be part of the case to make the coincidence. And the thing is we brought this up, and I said I was going to mention this when we talk about coincidence. We talked about going to baseball games. You and I have both been to our share. Now, I've gone and watched the Mariners. You've gone and watched what, Red Sox?
Yankees.
Not the Red Sox? Okay.
No, I'm in the different. I'm in the other state. Other half of the rivalry. I know. I know you're being facetious. I got
you. I was. So anyway, but neither one of us have ever walked out of the game holding on to a foul ball. We've been to plenty of games. I've been in seats where, I was certainly in a position where I could have had one if one would have been hit to me. I never walked. And for a guy to get one on back-to-back hits, the same at bat, same batter, same pitcher, back-to-back pitches, he gets a foul ball hit to him. What are the odds of that? Next to none. So could this guy have been in the same general vicinity of the same tragedy twice? Yes, absolutely. Anything can happen. They say put a million monkeys in a room with a million typewriters and somebody's going to hit chicken.
Yep. They also, if you believe in that giant machine over in Geneva is going to find the God particle, supposedly already found the God particle. We're going to figure out how the universe was created. Yeah. If you can buy that, you should be able to buy things like the owl theory, which we'll be discussing soon.
Yes, we will. Oh my God. Called the owl theory, tells you how far out to lunch this has gone.
Yeah. But at the same time, there's someone out there who's gotten attacked by an owl before going, fuck you, man. The owl theory could be true. All right. Well, I think, we didn't spend as much time going over this block as we did the last block, but it's hard. One of the things with this show, and I think any show like this where there's going to be elements that I will say are just flat out frustrating for the audience. It's hard to not start to sound like a broken record, because I know that, like, as each episode, when I watched them the first time through, as each hour would end and start, I'd be like, Jesus, I don't know how much more of this I could take. And every single episode, I'd be like, how are they allowed to get away with this? Like, oh my God. And I feel like I've said it a lot this episode. And I feel like if we went point by point by point, it would be
a broken record.
Yeah, and we didn't even get to them, finding the blowpoke in the garage. We could probably pick up on that in the next one, because that's a big deal. But like right there, the horror of how out of your hands, and even seemingly out of the hands of competent people sometimes, even with rules and regulations and protocols that make believe could convict you. So, verdict being he was found guilty. So we'll pick up in the next block with what happens in the aftermath of that.
Yeah, and there's a few notes about that I want to make, because I want to talk about his health and everything else like that, which you actually see the toll that it takes on his health and everything else. So, we'll talk about all that, and we will visit the blowpoke, because this is the supposed missing murder weapon.
It's the smoking gun that was found cold and no smoke emitting from it at all.
Cobwebs on it and spiders and everything, and rust and dead bugs, and then brought into court and shown, and yet still.
Oh, well, but even the way she was showing the pictures, like, oh, look at this picture of spider web. Guess that's supposed to be some kind of significant something. It's like, I feel like we're in a fucking like backwoods, somebody's like grandma yelling at me kind of thing here. What the hell is this? You know, it's just everything about it, the decorum, the protocol, the judge, fuck you, judge, whatever your name is. That was just like absolute amateur hour.
I want to
All
say
the
Brown or Simpson, but I don't want to.
all the bullshit he allowed to happen in his courtroom, like he should be, you know, stripped of his position if he still has one now. That horror from start to finish. So hopefully you've been able to stick with us out there. I know this one's tough. This is a tough
Hope we didn't make
show.
you tired as these episodes made us.
I mean, it's a little bit different. You'd think it'd be harder to talk about some of the things that we talked about on Mindhunter, but I think because this is real, I mean, Mindhunter was real too, but it's being shown in a very dramatic and fantastical way. It's easier to react to that as a TV show than it is to react to this as this is a documentary. Documentary to me was always supposed to be in that other camp of this is more true than it's not. As much as you can manipulate things by the way the order in which they're presented, the music you embellish it with, whatever graphical treatments you add to this thing. But for the most part, this thing is coming from a place of truth. It's footage that was captured live on the spot as these things were happening and put together in sequence so that we could feel like we were actually part of this whole phenomenon, you know, and we get to see pieces from both sides. So it's not like it was completely 100% shown from the defense's point of view, but it was shown enough that you know that they believe the defense's story. And I feel like for me, it definitely convinced me, but I was already a little skeptical. I'm a weird person. So, you know, there's that too.
But it turned me around because, like I said, when I went into this, from remembering what I'd seen on the media about this case, I had this guy painted as guilty as sin. I had this guy, I was like, yeah, he did it. And when I watched this, it changed my mind. And this is something that I've used when I've talked to people. I say, look, have you watched the staircase? And when they say, oh, no, I haven't meant to. I said, well, do you remember the case? And a couple of people have been like, oh, yeah, I do. And what did you think? Oh, yeah, he was really guilty. I said, watch the documentary and then tell me afterwards that you feel the same way.
And have you spoken to anybody since they've watched it, or is that?
I'm still waiting to hear back from a couple of people. So by the time we do our next episode, hopefully I'll have some feedback.
We'll follow up on that. That's cool. So that's the part about this whole thing I love. And so for everybody out there, I know you're going to have the business coming up here at the end of the episode, telling you all the ways you can do it. Please get in touch with us. Give us some feedback. Let us know how we're doing out there. Hit us up. You can email us. You can email us at info@hollow9ine.com. It's the word hollow, the number 9, ine.com. You can also, I think, we actually don't have the email address for this show set up yet at the time that we're recording this, but it'll probably be staircase@hollow9.com. You know, it's like we kind of do it intuitively like that. You know, it's like there's tangent city@hollow9.com. Any show you want to email, it's probably some part of the show's title. You can find that information actually on hollow9.com under each of the shows where you can stream each of our shows and download them. You know, let us know how we're doing and be a part of the situation here. We like to interact, you know, and I think a big part of let us know if we're wrong. Let us know what you think. I think a big part of the whole sort of experience of watching shows like this these days is inherently coming with that. You know, you're doing these kinds of discussions on Facebook. Well, you know, this is a spot where you're going to get your words put on air. You know, if you send us in, you know, let us know what you're thinking out there. So we're happy to continue the conversation outside of our circle of 2 people right now. But until then, thank you for checking us out, and come back next time where we will pick up with episode 9. And I think what are there, total of 13 now? Let's see. Total of 13. So we'll probably go 9 through 11 and then do 12, 13 and the owl theory. So you got 2 more episodes at least of podcast Under the Stairs talking about the staircase. Probably looking at maybe some Evil Genius after that. Or we also have that new Netflix show, I Am a Killer, that just showed up in the carousel of items that you could choose. So we've got that to look at, and you know, all kinds of cool stuff going on at Hollow9. So check out hollow9.com for the rest of that. I'm Dave the Klone. This was the most long-winded goodbye ever. Certainly not Irish in any respect. Maybe we'll do those from now on. Just mid-sentence, just drop out. But while you're not looking, we're gone. And but until then, until next time, you know, meeting adjourned, and we'll see you on the next one. Oh shit! Do you want to pimp? Do you want to pimp any shit before we go?
I do it on everything. We're good.
All right, cool.
I was gonna say I've got what might not be awesome news because the nectar flow ended. So we're still not sure if we're going to have a harvest, even
Oh
off of a really
no.
good hive. So, however, here's what's going to happen. If we are able to pull 2 jars worth off, we're going to obviously get one.
Yeah.
And because we're not going to tell anybody else, and we don't want anybody here local saying, "Oh, you got one and we didn't," I'm going to send you the other one.
Oh man, that's awesome, dude.
We'll send it to New York. That way, we don't have to let anybody here down. Wife and I can package it up, ship it to you, and nobody has to know.
And we'll just keep enjoying some tea with honey and lemon on all of our shows from then on. Sounds good. All right, folks, you heard it here first. Don't tell anybody up there where TW lives, though. We don't want the torches and pitchforks showing up at his house.
No.
All right, until next time, when we'll be drenched in honey. Peace out.